In today's episode, I want to talk about practical things you can start putting in place now if you want to take the summer off your socials and even your business. Because I am a huge advocate for slowing down over summer, especially if you've got children, family commitments, or honestly, if you're just exhausted and craving a bit more breathing room. But I also speak to so many women who just don't think it's possible. So in today's episode, I want to walk you through some of the things that I personally do before summer to make the whole thing feel easier, calmer, and much more intentional. If you are craving a slower summer this year, but you also want to protect the momentum that you've built in your business, then this episode is for you. But before we dive in, if you are new here, hi, I am your host, Becky. I am a multi-award winning business owner and the dreamer behind the Boss Your Socials Club. I created this podcast to help women like you simplify your life and grow a business on your terms without the overwhelm. So if you are ready for some no BS advice, practical tips and honest chats that make business and life feel lighter and more doable, then you are in exactly the right place. Right then, let's get started with this week's episode. I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make with summer, and this is definitely a mistake that I used to make, is waiting until the last minute to think about it. Because we have so much to do and we're thinking about so many other things in the run up to it. So what ends up happening is we get to the week before, or maybe a couple of weeks before the holidays, and suddenly realize the children are about to be home for 6 weeks, and then panic because we haven't planned anything outside of in our own heads. Our workload still looks the same, and we're trying to cram everything into a few days whilst already feeling overwhelmed and having a to-do list as long as our arm. Which is why I wanted to talk about this now, sort of at the beginning to the midway through June, because there is still time to plan for this and stay calm. We still have a good 5 or 6 weeks before the summer holidays kick in. You don't need to have everything figured out immediately, but this is a perfect time to start thinking ahead and putting things in place gradually so that summer feels supportive instead of stressful. So for the last few summers, I have taken the bulk of the summer off. I've taken like a chunk of 4 weeks off, and that is what I now plan for. So I'm not saying that that's what you're going to be doing in your business. It's fine if it looks differently for you, but I'm just going to walk you through what I do to be able to do that. So the very first thing I always do is work out what summer is realistically going to look like for me. I personally do this on a paper calendar. So I print out a paper monthly calendar off of the internet because my brain just works better visually that way and seeing it written down in front of me. I need to physically see the weeks in front of me and map things out properly. Now, you can obviously do this digitally as well. I just prefer doing it on paper, but whatever works best for you. But like I said, for me, printing out the summer holidays and scribbling all over them just makes it feel much easier to process. I start by putting in all the things that are non-negotiable. So for me, that might be Boss Your Socials Club sessions that are still running over summer, appointments, holidays we've booked, or days where I know I absolutely have to work. And this isn't necessarily all work stuff. Like I said, it might be appointments or holidays that we've booked. It might be personal life stuff, but it's all non-negotiable stuff that definitely has to happen on a certain day in the summer. Then I start looking at the practical side of things around that. So where will the children be on those days? Will I need help? Do I need holiday clubs? Do I need to coordinate with my husband and ask him to book some time off? Which weeks do I actually want to fully switch off and have fully off? And one really important thing I always add in at this stage is to look ahead to the summer months as well in my Google calendar, so where I have like recurring appointments and things like this, and look at the time I want to take off. And I then move or reschedule any regular appointments that don't actually have to happen on the days that they are happening. It's just that they are in the calendar. I look at recurring tasks or work commitments to before or after that time off work, because it's often not the big obvious things that actually creates the most stress. It's all the little ongoing things that quietly sit in the background, taking up headspace. So if something can be moved, batched or dealt with early, now is a time to start doing it. And I know this might sound really simple, but this step alone can completely change how summer feels mentally, because suddenly you're not carrying everything in your head at once. You can actually see what your actual capacity is. Now, before I carry on, I want to share something here from a conversation I recently had with one of my members in Boss Your Socials Club, because it really sums up how different this can look for everyone. She shared that this summer feels a bit more chaotic than usual for her, mainly because her husband works shifts and she doesn't yet know what his schedule is going to look like, which obviously makes planning really difficult. She also has support from both sets of parents nearby, which is amazing, but it's more ad hoc rather than pre-planned. So it feels less structured than previous years where she's been able to have everything booked in advance. And what came through, I think, really strongly in that conversation is that even when you're organized, summer can still feel chaotic. And there are certain things that you just can't plan for. Even when you have support, it can feel unpredictable. And even when things look fine on paper, your brain can still feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of moving parts you need to think about. I shared in that conversation that we were having that my experience is quite different from hers. I don't have family nearby who can regularly help with childcare. So over the years, I've had to build a much more structured approach where I essentially plan to be off for large chunks of August. Whilst now this is something that I love and I really enjoy and it helps me switch off from my business, it originally came from necessity and it didn't happen overnight. The first year I took just a few days off, then I took a couple of weeks off, then it grew to most of August, and now I'm in a place where I can take around 4 back-to-back weeks off, which is wonderful. But like I said, I'm doing that now because I want to and I love it, and it really helps me live the life I want to live and feel more balanced and all that kind of stuff. But it originally came from a place of necessity and it didn't happen overnight. It also only got to the point that it's got to today because I realized something really important. I was actually more stressed at trying to juggle everything than I was when I gave myself proper permission to step back and actually take a break. I felt like I had my fingers in all the pies and I was doing nothing well most summers, whereas now I am either working or I'm not working, and that just works so much better for me. There was a summer a few years ago where I tried to do the opposite of that, basically. I tried to work, parent, manage childcare all at once, and I just found myself snapping at the kids way more than was okay. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't in any awful, horrific way that is going to long-term scar them, but it's not a feeling that's nice and it's not something that feels good. I felt guilty a lot of the time, and I was trying to squeeze work into tiny pockets of time that didn't really exist. And I came back in the September just feeling utterly broken and more exhausted than I was before the summer holidays. And it was that moment that I realized that something had to change for me. And I think this is such a key point because how you approach summer really depends on your support system, your business model, your capacity, what you want and what your goals are, and also what season of life you're in. There isn't one right way to do this, and no one is better or worse for working the summer or not working the summer. It's just about what works for you. So in terms of getting ready for the summer, I also want to talk about social media because this is where I see a lot of people either go all in or completely disappear. And I am absolutely not anti-break. If you know me at all, or if you've listened to the podcast, you know I'm the hugest advocate for taking breaks. It is the opposite of being anti-break. I encourage all business owners to take a break, including from social media, regularly throughout the year. I think stepping back over summer can be one of the best things you can do for your well-being, your creativity and your energy. But I also think there's a difference between resting intentionally and disappearing without a plan. Because unfortunately, social media platforms are built on consistency. The algorithm learns who you are, who your content is for, and who engages with it. And when you completely stop posting for a long period of time, it can take a while to rebuild that momentum when you come back. And that's why my approach is usually somewhere in the middle. I don't post at my normal level over summer. I massively reduce it. And my content isn't designed for engagement or any kind of Insta-worthy results that I could say how many people I reached. It's designed to stay visible and it's designed to keep the algorithm happy. And it's remembering that consistency isn't about keeping up my normal level or posting every day or anything like that. It's about sticking to some kind of consistency. So sometimes that might look like one post a week, nothing fancy, nothing overwhelming, just enough to maintain a presence. So I'm not starting from scratch in September. And when I come back in September, the algorithm still knows who I am and who to push my content out to. My stats will always dramatically plummet in August, but I'm completely okay with that because the goal for me, like I just said, is for the algorithm to still know who I am and for me to still be visible in some way. It's not about getting the most reach I possibly can or making a ton of sales over the summer. It's just about that consistency, the visibility, and the algorithm remembering who I am. So to put that into real numbers, last year, my monthly views decreased by 75%. Like I said, they dramatically plummeted. And that's pretty consistent over the years of what it drops by. But it took me less than a week. It was just really a few days of being back in September to get them back up to my normal levels, because the algorithm still knew who to push my content out to. And so it was reaching those people. I didn't have to spend time building that back up. Now, obviously, I don't know how long it would have taken me if I hadn't had that content going out there, but I know it was quicker by just having a little bit of content go out and keeping the algorithm happy. And you can make the summer content really, really easy for yourself. I rely heavily on repurposing old posts, content that performed well, podcast clips, throwbacks to podcast clips, simple educational captions, things that don't require me to reinvent the wheel when I already have enough going on, and posts that aren't designed to get lots of engagement. They are just effectively information posts that is optimized with those keywords, that is talking about my content topics and is keeping the algorithm happy. Because the truth is, most people don't see your content the first time anyway. So repurposing is always a good thing. And repetition is not a bad thing in marketing. You need to say the same thing over and over again. So when I talk to people about creating their own summer plan, I often talk about a minimum viable visibility plan for summer, which is basically stripping back your social media to the absolute essentials and basics. Not your full strategy, not full-blown launches, not the busiest version of yourself, just what is needed to stay gently visible whilst you rest and actually switch off from social media and don't even need to look at it if you don't want to. So like I said earlier, that might be one post a week or more if you have the capacity to batch it. A really good tip here is to start now blocking out some time, just a small amount of time each week, to put together one post. So do one post a week and schedule it in the summer holidays. So start scheduling it from the end of July. So if you do a post this week, schedule it for the first week of the summer holidays. And then next week, do that again. And the second week of the summer holidays, and so on. Because that means that it's a short space of time that you can put that post together. But by the summer holidays, that would give you 6 posts to cover the entire school holiday, and you can stay consistent. And like I said, they can be repurposed posts, so they don't have to take you any more than 5 or 10 minutes to put together. Alongside that, there are a few really practical things I also recommend doing before summer, because they make such a difference when you come back. So it's things like you can start drafting your out of office now. So when it gets to the summer, you can just copy and paste it over and you don't even need to think about it. Or if you're in Gmail, you can draft it now, or probably other email systems as well, but you can draft it now and you can put the schedule date on already for when you want it to start going out from and when you want it turned off again. So I think drafting your out of office now just takes something off your to-do list as we get closer to the summer. Also, it's worth paying attention to your emails and unsubscribing from the ones that you don't read. Setting up inbox folders or filters so that things are all organized automatically if you want to, sending invoices early where possible, and clearing out small admin tasks that you really don't want waiting for you in September, or you don't want to be doing in the last day before you're trying to switch off for your time off. I also really recommend starting to communicate everything clearly now, whether that's clients, members, or customers. Just let them know what your summer rhythm looks like. You could do a social media post about it if you want to, or like I said, you can have it on your out of office or whatever it is. And if you do it as a social media post, you can then pin that post so people see it when they go to your profile. You don't need a long explanation. Something simple about reduced hours or slower replies is more than enough. And most people are far more understanding than we expect them to be, or that we build them up in our head to be. And I think the biggest takeaway from everything I've shared today is basically this: summer will always feel easier when you plan for the version of your life that actually exists, not the version that you wish you had. You need to work with what you've got. Like I said, early doors, when I was taking time off in the summer, it wasn't the full summer. I'd have loved it to have been, but I wasn't in the position to do that then. And if I'd have tried, I'd have just ended up feeling really behind and probably feeling worse than I originally did anyway. So I needed to plan for the version of my life that existed at that time, not the version that I wish I had. So if working a few days makes it easier for you, then don't insist on taking the whole time off just so that it looks good on social media to say that you're off, but it doesn't actually feel good in real life. If you want to take the whole summer off, but you can't right now, then do what I did and manage it in small steps and make a little bit of progress each summer, with each summer getting you closer to your goal of actually taking a big chunk of time off or the whole summer off. You don't need a perfect system. You don't need a perfectly organized summer. You just need a version that works for you, your family, and your capacity right now. And I mentioned earlier about your email inbox and doing some things around that. I've recently done an episode on how I manage my emails and how I do inbox zero. So I'll share that in the show notes in case you would find that useful, because that goes into a lot more detail about how I do it. And things that might help you and some more tips that might help you. So if you think it would, it's only a short episode. I'll link to it in the show notes and you can go and check it out. But basically, with a bit of planning ahead, some honest communication and a lighter approach to visibility, you can absolutely create a summer that feels slower, softer, and far more manageable without losing everything you've built in your business and the momentum that you have before the summer. So to finish, here is a simple recap of what to focus on if you want a calmer, more intentional summer. First, map out your summer visually, whether that's on paper or a digital calendar, so you can actually see what your capacity is. Then add in all non-negotiables first, so work sessions, holidays, appointments, childcare needs, all that kind of stuff. Decide how you want to work. So do you want to batch your working days so they're in chunks rather than scattered, or do you want a day off here and there? I know from my experience, when I've had a day off here and there rather than in chunks, I just wasn't able to switch off, but it depends what works better for your brain. Plan your childcare, holiday clubs and family support as early as you can. And even if it isn't really solid, make sure that if you're not sure whether someone's going to let you down, so if you have parents that it might be ad hoc with, that the work that you're doing on that day isn't something that the children really are just going to struggle to be around for or disrupt you. Make sure it's work that you can get done whilst they're there and maybe on a screen or whatever it might be. Decide when you want to fully switch off and plan around that. Move or reschedule all recurring tasks, appointments and commitments outside of your break and either delete them if they can actually just be skipped for a month or just move them around to a time that suits you better over the summer. You can also create a simple minimum viable visibility plan for social media, even if it's just one post a week. And remember, repurposing old content to reduce the pressure really helps with that. Draft your out of office and even schedule it now if you want to. If it will help you, set up email filters and unsubscribe from unnecessary emails so that you don't come back to a load of emails that you can just delete straight away. Send invoices and admin early where possible. Communicate your summer plans clearly to clients, members or customers. And most importantly, remember, you don't need to do summer perfectly. You just need to do it in a way that works for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am honestly so grateful you choose to spend your time here. Before you go though, if you love this podcast and you're a woman running a small business who wants to make social media easier and business life less lonely, I have got something for you. The Boss Your Socials Club is here to bring you inspiration, accountability, confidence and community. It's a place where we ban the word should because we believe in bespoke advice that will work for you, your stage of life and your business. You get a monthly content plan, ready to use templates, accountability and action sessions, a private members podcast, expert support, a brilliant community of women who get it, and so much more. It's like having a mini social media expert and a bunch of cheerleaders in your pocket so that you can show up with confidence without the overwhelm. Membership starts at just £14 a month, and there is different tiers depending on the level of support you want. Thank you so much again for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.